We need to finalize the Meridian Industries contract tonight. Tell them we'll meet at the Harborview conference room at 9 p.m. I heard my business partner, Cassandra, whisper into her phone, thinking I was still in the supply closet organizing inventory. Make sure you bring all the financial projections we discussed, beautiful. This is our biggest opportunity yet. When I walked into that conference room 4 hours later and saw her shaking hands with my biggest client, while my best friend of 12 years, Natalie, sat beside them with a stack of documents that looked suspiciously like our proprietary business plans, my entire world collapsed. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story of business betrayal resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story about workplace revenge is something truly explosive I can't wait to share. The autumn rain was hammering against the windows of our downtown office in Brookfield Heights that Tuesday evening when I first noticed something wasn't right. My business partner, Cassandra Wright, had been acting increasingly secretive over the past few weeks. Hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, mysterious client meetings that never appeared on our shared calendar, and that calculating look in her eyes whenever I mentioned our upcoming expansion plans. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to uncover. I had just finished reviewing the quarterly reports for our marketing consultancy, Sterling and Associates, when I decided to surprise Cassandra with her favorite Thai food from Golden Dragon on Fifth Avenue. Our office, located in the prestigious Hartwell Business Complex, was unusually quiet for 7 p.m. on a weeknight. Walking through the frosted glass doors of our suite, my heels clicking against the polished concrete floors, I called out her name, expecting to hear her usual cheerful response from her corner office. Instead, an unnatural silence greeted me. That's when I heard it, her voice, low and intimate, drifting from the small conference room we used for private client calls. I set the takeout bags on the reception desk and moved quietly toward the sound, my instincts screaming that something was very wrong. "I can't wait to present our proposal tonight," Cassandra was saying, her voice carrying that smooth, persuasive tone she reserved for closing major deals. "Make sure you wear that navy blazer I helped you pick out last month. You look incredibly professional in it." My blood turned to ice. Natalie had never owned a navy blazer like that until recently, and I distinctly remember her saying it was a gift from a new friend she'd been working on some freelance projects. I pressed myself against the wall outside the conference room, straining to hear every word. "The usual place," she continued, and I could practically hear the satisfaction in her voice. "The Harborview building, conference room 304. Just like we practiced during our last 3 meetings. Conference room 304. The same room where Cassandra and I had landed our first major client 2 years ago. The same space where we had celebrated signing the lease expansion that would double our office size. The same place where I thought we were building our future together as business partners. My legs felt weak as the horrible realization began to crystallize. "I love working with you," she said softly, before ending the call. "You understand the vision in a way that others just don't." I stumbled backwards, my hand flying to my mouth to silence the gasp threatening to escape. Cassandra, my trusted business partner of 3 years, was clearly planning something behind my back. The woman who had convinced me to leave my corporate job to start this company with her, who had access to all our client lists and proprietary strategies, who knew every weakness and strength of our business model, was betraying everything we had built together. I rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face as my mind raced through the possibilities. Who was she meeting with? What kind of proposal were they discussing? And why did it sound like she was coordinating with someone who had been to multiple secret meetings? The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Natalie Chen, my college roommate and closest friend, had recently started asking detailed questions about our business operations. She claimed she was considering starting her own consulting firm and wanted advice, but now I realized she had been conducting reconnaissance. 3 weeks ago, she had casually asked about our client retention strategies over coffee. 2 weeks ago, she inquired about our pricing models during our weekly yoga class. Last week, she even requested copies of some of our marketing materials, saying she wanted to understand current industry standards. I had been so proud to share our success with my best friend, never imagining she was systematically gathering intelligence to use against me. The shower was running in Cassandra's private office bathroom, her usual end-of-day routine. I had maybe 15 minutes before she would emerge, probably to make some excuse about working late on a sensitive client matter. My hands shaking, I grabbed my purse and car keys. I needed to see this betrayal with my own eyes, to understand the full scope of what they were planning. The drive to the Harborview building felt like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Every red light seemed to mock me with memories of trust and partnership that were apparently all lies. The Harborview building stood like a gleaming monument to corporate ambition, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the late-night meetings that determined the fate of businesses across the city. As I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring up at the building that was about to become the scene of my professional destruction, I realized that everything I thought I knew about loyalty, friendship, and business partnerships was about to be shattered forever. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. To understand how devastating that moment truly was, you need to know what my life looked like before it all fell apart. Just 18 months earlier, I thought I was living my entrepreneurial dream in the thriving business district of Brookfield Heights, where gleaming corporate towers stretched toward the sky, and every coffee shop buzzed with the energy of ambitious professionals networking and closing deals. Cassandra Wright and I had launched Sterling & Associates from nothing more than a shared vision and 2 laptops in my cramped studio apartment. We met during a digital marketing conference at the Grandview Convention Center, where I was presenting on social media strategy for small businesses, and she was leading a workshop on client relationship management. After my presentation, she approached me with that confident smile that would later become so familiar. "Your presentation was brilliant," she had said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Cassandra Wright, and I think we should talk about changing the consulting industry together." That conversation over coffee at Riverside Bistro lasted 6 hours. We discovered we had complementary skills that seemed almost too perfect to be coincidental. I brought creative strategy and content development expertise, while she excelled at business development and client management. More importantly, we shared the same vision of building a consultancy that actually delivered results rather than just impressive presentations. Within 2 months, we had formalized our partnership. I invested my entire savings of $35,000 from my previous job as a marketing director at Compson & Associates, while Cassandra contributed $40,000 and her extensive network of potential clients from her years working at prestigious firms in the city. We were going to be equal partners in every sense, sharing profits, decisions, and the risks that came with building something from the ground up. Our first office was a modest 800-square-foot space on the 3rd floor of the Hartwell Business Complex. But to us, it felt like a palace. We spent weekends painting the walls a motivating shade of deep blue, assembling IKEA furniture, and creating a vision board that mapped out our 5-year growth plan. The centerpiece was a conference table we found at an estate sale, which we refinished together while dreaming about the major clients we would eventually serve around it. Sterling & Associates specialized in comprehensive digital marketing strategies for mid-sized businesses looking to scale. Our approach combined data-driven insights with creative storytelling, and our results spoke for themselves. Within the first year, we had secured contacts with 15 clients, including Meridian Industries, the manufacturing company that became our flagship account. My expertise lay in content strategy, social media management, and creative campaign development. I could take a client's vague idea about increasing brand awareness and transform it into a cohesive, measurable marketing campaign that delivered real ROI. Cassandra handled new business development, client relationships, and the financial aspects of our operations. She had this incredible ability to walk into a room full of executives and convince them that we were exactly what their company needed. The partnership felt seamless.
We complemented each other's strengths and covered for each other's weaknesses. When I got too caught up in creative perfectionism, Cassandra would remind me about deadlines and budgets. When she became overly focused on profit margins, I would bring her back to the creative vision that made our work distinctive. Our success attracted attention throughout Brookfield Heights business community. We were featured in the Regional Business Journal as 30 under 30 entrepreneurs to watch. The Brookfield Chamber of Commerce invited us to speak at their monthly networking events. Other marketing professionals began reaching out for advice on starting their own consultancies. Then there was Natalie Chen, my anchor through all of this professional chaos. Natalie had been my roommate at Westfield University, where we both studied communications with dreams of making it in the competitive world of marketing and public relations. She was the one who talked me through my fears about leaving my secure corporate job to start Sterling & Associates. She was the first person I called when we landed our first major contract, and she was the one who celebrated with champagne when we moved into our bigger office space last spring. After graduation, Natalie had taken a different path, working as a freelance marketing consultant while pursuing her master's degree in business administration part-time. She often joked that she was living vicariously through my entrepreneurial adventures while playing it safe with her freelance work and advanced degree. Our friendship had only grown stronger as my business thrived. Every Tuesday, we maintained our tradition of meeting for lunch at Harvest Kitchen on Maple Street, where we would sit in our usual corner booth and I would update her on the latest Sterling & Associates developments. Natalie was genuinely fascinated by the business side of what we were doing. She asked thoughtful questions about our client acquisition strategies, our pricing models, and our plans for expansion. "I'm so proud of what you've built," she would often say, her eyes lighting up with what I interpreted as admiration. "You took such a risk, and it's paying off in ways you never could have imagined." Natalie also developed a friendship with Cassandra, which I encouraged because I wanted the people closest to me to get along. The three of us would occasionally meet for drinks at Skyline Lounge on Friday evenings, discussing everything from industry trends to our personal goals. Cassandra seemed to genuinely enjoy Natalie's company, often commenting on how refreshing it was to spend time with someone who understood the marketing world but wasn't a direct competitor. Our social circle in Brookfield Heights embraced this dynamic. At networking events hosted by the Young Professionals Association or dinner parties thrown by clients like David and Amanda Sterling from Sterling Manufacturing, we were often invited as a trio. People would say things like, "Are you bringing Natalie?" when they invited Cassandra and me to events, as if our friendship group was the natural order of things. This was the world I thought I knew, a world where business partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared vision, where friendships were sacred, and where success was something to be celebrated together rather than stolen. A world where late nights at the office meant working toward common goals, and where your closest friends' questions about your business came from genuine curiosity rather than calculated intelligence gathering. Looking back now, I can see there were signs I missed, moments that should have raised red flags. But when you're building something you believe in with people you trust completely, you don't go looking for cracks in the foundation. You never expect the people closest to you to be the ones planning to bring the whole structure down. Our office overlooked the bustling intersection of Commerce Street and Innovation Boulevard, and I used to love standing at those windows during our late-night strategy sessions, watching the city lights twinkle as we planned our next big client pitch. I thought those lights represented opportunity, growth, and the bright future we were building together. I had no idea they were also illuminating the careful plotting that was taking place right under my nose, as the two people I trusted most systematically planned to steal everything I had worked so hard to create. The parking garage of the Harborview building felt like a tomb as I sat in my car, watching the elevators through the glass lobby. It was 8:45 p.m. and I could see various business professionals coming and going, their faces illuminated by the glow of their smartphones as they headed to late-night meetings that would determine the fate of companies and careers. My hands were trembling as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what I had overheard in our office. Every rational part of my mind wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation for Cassandra's secretive phone call, but my gut knew better. The intimate tone, the careful planning, the reference to previous meetings, this wasn't a standard client consultation. At exactly 9:03 p.m., I watched Cassandra's silver BMW pull into the executive parking section. Even from 4 floors up in the garage, I could see her confident stride as she walked toward the lobby, carrying the leather portfolio we had purchased together for important client presentations. She was wearing her favorite black power suit, the one she called her deal closer, and her red hair was styled in the sleek bob that made her look like she belonged in a boardroom. 3 minutes later, a blue Honda Civic that I recognized all too well parked in a visitor space. My stomach dropped when Natalie stepped out, looking nervous but determined. She was indeed wearing a navy blazer I had never seen before, expensive-looking, perfectly tailored, and completely out of character for someone who usually shopped at discount retailers while saving money for graduate school. But what made my blood run cold was what she was carrying: a thick manila folder that looked suspiciously similar to our client files, and a laptop bag that seemed unusually heavy for someone who claimed to only do basic freelance work. I waited another 5 minutes, then made my way down to the lobby. The security guard, a friendly older man named Frank, who recognized me from previous visits to various client meetings, nodded as I approached the desk. "Good evening, miss," he said with a smile. "Running late for a meeting?" "Actually, I'm supposed to meet my business partner on the 3rd floor. Cassandra, right? She should have signed in about 10 minutes ago." Frank consulted his logbook. "Yes, here she is. Conference room 304, along with," he squinted at his handwriting, "Natalie Chin. They're listed as having a meeting with Meridian Industries representatives."
My heart nearly stopped. Meridian Industries was our biggest client, a $200,000 annual contract that represented nearly 30% of our total revenue. The contract was up for renewal in 6 weeks, and we had been preparing an extensive presentation to not only retain their business, but expand our services to include their 3 subsidiary companies. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my mind racing through the implications. If Natalie was meeting with Meridian Industries, it could only mean one thing: she was positioning herself to steal our biggest client. And if Cassandra was facilitating that meeting, then my business partner, the woman I had trusted with everything, was actively helping to destroy the company we had built together. The 3rd floor of Harborview was designed for high-stakes business meetings. Thick carpet muffled footsteps, and the walls were lined with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Conference room 304 was at the end of a long hallway, its frosted glass doors providing just enough transparency to see shadows moving inside. I positioned myself behind a decorative pillar about 20 feet away, close enough to see into the room but far enough to remain unnoticed. What I witnessed made my worst fears seem optimistic in comparison. Through the glass, I could see 4 figures seated around the polished conference table. Cassandra sat at the head, gesturing confidently as she spoke. Natalie was to her right, occasionally nodding and referencing documents from her manila folder. Across from them sat 2 people I recognized immediately: Robert Meridian, the company's CEO, and his operations director, Patricia Vance. But the most damning evidence was spread across the table between them. Even from my limited vantage point, I could see documents that looked exactly like our proprietary client analysis reports, marketing strategies, and financial projections, materials that Natalie should never have had access to, and certainly shouldn't have been presenting to our client without me present. I moved closer, pressing myself against the wall adjacent to the conference room. The soundproofing wasn't perfect, and I could catch fragments of the conversation that made my stomach churn. As you can see from our comprehensive analysis, Natalie's voice was confident, professional, nothing like the uncertain tone she used when discussing her own freelance projects with me. "This transition would be seamless for your company," Cassandra was saying. "Natalie's firm has all the institutional knowledge about your account, plus the flexibility to scale services in ways that Sterling & Associates simply cannot match." Natalie's firm? My best friend had apparently started her own consulting company without mentioning it to me, and my business partner was actively helping her poach our most valuable client? The pricing structure we're proposing represents a 15% savings over your current arrangement, while expanding services to include the strategic initiatives that Sterling has been promising but hasn't delivered. That was a complete lie. We had delivered every strategic initiative we had promised Meridian Industries, often ahead of schedule and under budget.
The expansion into their subsidiary companies was something we had been actively preparing for months, waiting for the contract renewal meeting to present our comprehensive plan. I have to admit, Robert Meridian's voice carried clearly through the glass. This is quite unexpected. We've been very satisfied with Sterling & Associates' work. What makes you think we should make a change now? Business is about evolution, Cassandra replied smoothly. Sterling was perfect for your needs 2 years ago, but your company has grown. Natalie's approach is more agile, more innovative, and frankly, more cost-effective. Plus, she has the advantage of understanding your account intimately while bringing fresh perspectives that my current partner simply cannot provide. The casual way Cassandra dismissed me as my current partner, as if I was already relegated to the past, made my hands clench into fists. But what came next was even worse. I've been working closely with Natalie for the past 3 months, helping her understand the nuances of your account and transition planning. If you decide to make this change, I'd be willing to facilitate a smooth handover and provide consulting services to ensure continuity. 3 months! While I had been working 14-hour days to prepare for our biggest client presentation ever, my business partner had been secretly working with my best friend to steal that same client. Every late night, Cassandra claimed she was working on sensitive client matters. Every mysterious meeting that didn't appear on our shared calendar. Every hushed phone call that ended when I entered the room. It had all been part of an elaborate plan to cut me out of my own business. What about the existing contract with Sterling & Associates? Patricia Vance asked. We have legal obligations and established relationships. That's been carefully researched, Natalie replied, and I could see her pulling documents from her folder. The contract includes a 30-day termination clause for either party. Cassandra has confirmed that Sterling would not contest the termination, especially given the circumstances. What circumstances? What lies had they told about me to justify this betrayal? We're prepared to begin the transition immediately, Cassandra added. In fact, Natalie has already begun preliminary work on the Q4 campaign analysis you requested. She can have a complete presentation ready by Friday. The Q4 campaign analysis that I had been working on for the past 2 weeks, the analysis that was saved on our shared server, which Cassandra had full access to. They weren't just stealing our client, they were stealing my work and presenting it as Natalie's original research.
I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I activated the voice recording app. I needed evidence of what I was witnessing, proof of the systematic betrayal that had been orchestrated behind my back. But as I held the phone up, trying to capture their conversation, I realized that the real evidence was already staring me in the face. The manila folder Natalie had brought wasn't just similar to our client files. It contained actual copies of our proprietary documents, financial projections I had spent weeks developing, market analysis reports with my personal research notes still visible in the margins, and strategic recommendations that represented months of collaborative work between Cassandra and me. My best friend hadn't just betrayed our personal relationship, she had committed corporate espionage. And my business partner hadn't just violated our professional agreement, she had actively facilitated the theft of intellectual property and client relationships that we had built together. Standing in that hallway, watching my professional life being dismantled through a conference room window, I felt something shift inside me. The shock and hurt were still there, but underneath those emotions, a cold, calculating anger was beginning to take root. They thought they were so clever, so careful in their planning. They had underestimated me completely, assuming I would never discover their scheme until it was too late to fight back. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had shown me exactly who they really were before they had finished destroying everything I had worked for. And that meant I still had time to respond. Not as the trusting, naive business partner and friend they thought I knew, but as someone who finally understood that in business, as in life, you can only trust people as far as you can verify their actions. The meeting was wrapping up with handshakes and promises to finalize details by the end of the week. I quickly made my way back to the elevator, my mind already working through the implications of what I had witnessed and the options available to me. By the time I reached my car, I had made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them tonight. I wasn't going to storm into that conference room and demand explanations or beg them to reconsider.
Instead, I was going to do something that the trusting, naive version of myself would never have considered. I was going to get smart, get strategic, and get even. I barely slept that night, but it wasn't because of emotional devastation. It was because my mind was working at hyperspeed, analyzing every detail of what I had witnessed and formulating a plan that would protect everything I had built. By 6 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with a notepad, a cup of coffee, and a clarity of purpose I had never experienced before. The first thing I needed to understand was the full scope of their operation. How long had this really been going on? What other clients might be at risk? And most importantly, what legal vulnerabilities had they created for themselves in their rush to steal my business? I arrived at the Sterling & Associates office at 7:30 a.m., a full hour before Cassandra typically showed up. Using my master key access, I went directly to her office and began what would become the most important investigation of my professional life. I wasn't looking to cause drama or seek revenge. I was conducting business intelligence gathering, the same methodical approach we used when analyzing competitor strategies for our clients. Cassandra's computer was password protected, but she had made a critical error that many business owners make. She had saved passwords in her browser for convenience. Within minutes, I had access to her email accounts, both business and personal. What I discovered made the Harborview meeting look like just the tip of the iceberg. The email trail revealed a sophisticated operation that had been running for nearly 4 months. It started with what appeared to be innocent networking conversations between Cassandra and several former colleagues from her previous job at Pinnacle Marketing Group. These colleagues, I learned, were now working at competing firms throughout the region. The early emails were casual check-ins about industry trends and mutual contacts, but by July, the tone had shifted dramatically. Cassandra was sharing detailed information about Sterling & Associates' client list, our pricing strategies, and our upcoming business development plans. She was essentially providing competitive intelligence to rival firms, information that they were using to undercut our proposals and steal our prospects. One particularly damning email thread from August revealed Cassandra's frustration with what she called the limitations of working with a creative partner who doesn't understand the business development side. She wrote to a contact at Meridian Consulting, "I've built something substantial here, but I'm carrying dead weight. My partner is talented at the creative work, but she has no vision for scaling operations or maximizing profitability." The response from Meridian Consulting's business development director was equally revealing. "Have you considered a transition strategy? With your client relationships and business development skills, you could easily establish an independent operation. We'd be happy to discuss acquisition opportunities or partnership arrangements." But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Transition Planning that contained detailed financial analysis of Sterling & Associates' value, client contract terms, and asset distribution. Cassandra hadn't just been planning to leave, she had been systematically evaluating how to extract maximum value from our partnership while leaving me with minimal resources to continue operating.
The folder included spreadsheets showing which clients were most likely to follow her if she left, which contracts had the most favorable termination clauses, and even a timeline for gradually transferring key relationships to external partners before making her departure official. Natalie's involvement wasn't spontaneous. She had been recruited specifically because her outsider status would allow her to take over client relationships without the legal complications that would arise if Cassandra tried to compete directly with Sterling & Associates. A subfolder labeled Asset Protection contained even more disturbing revelations. Cassandra had been quietly transferring our shared business development investments to accounts that she controlled exclusively. The $15,000 we had jointly invested in premium software licenses had been moved to her personal business account. The $8,000 deposit we had put down for our expanded office lease had been redirected to a separate LLC she had formed without my knowledge. She had also been systematically backing up our client files, marketing materials, and proprietary methodologies to external drives. Every strategy document, every creative brief, every piece of intellectual property we had developed together was being copied and prepared for transfer to her new operation. But perhaps most calculating of all was her handling of our business insurance and legal protections. Our partnership agreement included non-compete clauses and intellectual property protections that should have prevented exactly what she was planning. However, Cassandra had been quietly consulting with a business attorney to identify loopholes and termination strategies that would minimize her legal exposure. By 8:45 a.m., I had documented everything with screenshots and printed copies. I also discovered that Cassandra had been using our business credit card for personal expenses related to her transition planning: meals with Natalie, consultation fees with attorneys, and even the cost of incorporating her new business entity. This wasn't just breach of partnership agreement, it was financial fraud. When Cassandra arrived at 9:15 a.m., I was sitting at my desk reviewing client reports, acting as if it was just another ordinary Tuesday morning. She seemed relaxed and confident, probably still basking in the success of the previous night's meeting. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, settling into her office with her usual routine. "How was your evening? I had to work late on some client development issues." "Oh, you know how it is. Caught up on some administrative work, reviewed the Meridian contract renewal timeline. Speaking of which, I was thinking we should schedule our presentation meeting with them soon. Robert mentioned he wanted to discuss expansion opportunities for their subsidiary companies." I watched her face carefully as I said this. There was just a flicker of something, maybe surprise, before she recovered her composure. "Actually," she said, "I've been thinking we might want to approach that differently. Maybe I should handle the Meridian renewals solo this time. You've been so busy with the creative campaigns, and I know you find the business development meetings tedious." The audacity was breathtaking. She was preparing to steal our biggest client while simultaneously suggesting I shouldn't be involved in the retention meeting. "That's thoughtful of you," I said with a smile, "but I actually enjoy the strategic planning aspects of client relationships. Plus, I've been developing some innovative approaches for their subsidiary expansion that I think could really differentiate our proposal." Her expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "What kind of innovative approaches?" "Oh, just some creative integration strategies that tie together their brand messaging across all three companies. Very comprehensive, very difficult for competitors to replicate. I've been working on it for weeks." This was completely true. I had been developing exactly that strategy, but now I understood why she looked uncomfortable. If I was actively developing innovative approaches for the Meridian account, it would complicate her plan to transition the client to Natalie's firm. "Well," she said carefully, "why don't you focus on finishing those creative strategies, and I'll handle the business development aspects. We can combine our efforts closer to the presentation date." "Sounds perfect," I agreed, knowing full well that there would be no joint presentation. The rest of the morning, I continued my investigation while maintaining the facade of normal business operations. I accessed our shared client database and discovered that Cassandra had been downloading contact information and project histories for all our major accounts. She hadn't just been planning to steal Meridian Industries, she was preparing to systematically poach our entire client base. I also noticed that several recent client inquiries had been mysteriously unsuccessful. Prospects who seemed enthusiastic during initial conversations had suddenly chosen competitors with lower bids and suspiciously similar service proposals. Now I understood why. Cassandra had been sharing our pitch strategies with competing firms in exchange for intelligence about other opportunities. By lunchtime, I had a complete picture of the conspiracy. This wasn't a recent development driven by personal ambition, it was a methodical extraction strategy that had been months in the making. Cassandra had been systematically hollowing out Sterling and Associates while positioning herself and her collaborators to benefit from its collapse. But she had made several critical errors that would work in my favor. First, she had used company resources to facilitate her betrayal, creating clear evidence of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Second, she had involved third parties like Natalie in activities that violated our intellectual property agreements. Third, she had been sloppy about covering her digital tracks, leaving a comprehensive evidence trail of her planning and execution. Most importantly, she had underestimated me completely. She saw me as the creative partner who didn't understand business strategy. someone who could be managed and maneuvered without realizing what was happening. She thought I would discover the betrayal only after it was too late to respond effectively. Instead, I now had detailed documentation of her activities, a clear understanding of her timeline, and most crucially, advanced knowledge of her next moves. While she was planning her exit strategy, I was planning her exposure. That afternoon, I began making discreet inquiries with business attorneys who specialized in partnership disputes and intellectual property theft. I also reached out to a forensic accountant recommended by one of our clients, explaining that I needed a confidential analysis of potential financial irregularities in a business partnership. By the time Cassandra left the office that evening, probably to meet with Natalie and plan their next move, I had already begun building a comprehensive legal and financial response to their betrayal. They thought they were playing chess, while I was playing checkers. They were about to learn that I had been studying their game all along, and I was several moves ahead of where they thought I was. Over the next 2 weeks, while Cassandra and Natalie continued their careful orchestration of what they thought was a foolproof plan, I began implementing a counter strategy that would turn their own tactics against them. The key was maintaining absolute normalcy while systematically documenting their activities and building an artist-saleable legal position. My first priority was protecting our legitimate client relationships. I began scheduling individual check-in meetings with our major accounts under the guise of routine quarterly reviews. During these meetings, I subtly reinforced Sterling and Associates' value proposition while gathering intelligence about any unusual contact they might have received from competitors. The meeting with Jennifer Torres, marketing director at Brookfield Manufacturing, was particularly revealing. As we reviewed their Q3 campaign performance over coffee at the Executive Club downtown, I casually mentioned that we had been receiving increased interest from other companies in their industry. "That's interesting you mention it," Jennifer said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "We actually got a call last week from someone claiming to have insider knowledge about our current marketing strategy. They suggested we might benefit from a more agile and cost-effective approach. The whole conversation felt off, like they knew too much about our internal processes." My blood ran cold, but I maintained a professional expression. Did they identify which firm they represented? Something called Chen Strategic Solutions. The woman was very knowledgeable, but when I asked how she knew so much about our account, she gave vague answers about industry research. I told her we were satisfied with our current arrangement, but she was surprisingly persistent. Chen Strategic Solutions. Natalie had not only started her own firm, but was already actively soliciting our clients using proprietary information she had no legal right to possess. This was concrete evidence of unfair competition and potential industrial espionage. "I appreciate you letting me know," I told Jennifer. "If you receive any more unsolicited contact, I'd be grateful if you could document the details. Sometimes these situations require legal follow-up to protect all parties involved." Similar conversations with other clients revealed that Natalie had contacted at least 6 of our accounts, always using detailed knowledge of their current strategies and pain points that she could only have obtained through Cassandra. But her approach was creating an unexpected backlash. Several clients were disturbed by the obvious breach of confidentiality and were now more loyal to Sterling and Associates than before. Meanwhile, I began what I privately called strategic misinformation operations. During casual conversations with Cassandra, I would mention fictional developments that would complicate their plans if she shared them with Natalie. I told her about a major new client prospect that required extensive financial documentation, knowing she would need to explain to Natalie why this opportunity wouldn't materialize. I discussed upcoming changes to our office lease that would affect transition timing, forcing them to adjust their carefully planned schedule. Most effectively, I began sharing false information about my own plans and reactions. I told Cassandra I was considering taking a sabbatical after the new year to focus on creative projects, implying that I was becoming disengaged from the business side of operations. I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by client management responsibilities and grateful for her willingness to handle the tedious business development work.
These comments were designed to make Cassandra overconfident about her ability to control the situation. If she believed I was already mentally checking out of Sterling and Associates, she might accelerate her timeline or become less cautious about covering her tracks. The strategy worked perfectly. Within days, Cassandra's behavior became noticeably more brazen. She began holding phone conversations in the office without the previous attempts at privacy. She started scheduling client meetings directly on our shared calendar, though I noticed these meetings were always with contacts I didn't recognize and at locations outside our usual client network. One particularly bold move came when she suggested we should reorganize our client portfolio to better align with our respective strengths. She proposed that she should take primary responsibility for relationship-heavy accounts like Meridian Industries, while I should focus on creative-intensive projects with smaller budgets and shorter timelines. It's really about playing to our strengths, she explained during what she probably thought was a persuasive presentation. You're most fulfilled when you can focus on the creative work without getting bogged down in contract negotiations and business development calls.
I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the proposal. That's an interesting approach. Would this change how we split revenue from those accounts? We'd need to work out the details, she said carefully, but I think we could structure something that's fair to both of us while maximizing our individual contributions. What she meant, of course, was that she wanted to transfer the high-value accounts to her exclusive control before transitioning them to Natalie's firm. But by asking about revenue sharing, I had forced her to reveal that she was already thinking about changing our fundamental partnership structure. During this period, I also began working with Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the forensic accountant I had consulted. His preliminary analysis of our business finances revealed irregularities that went far beyond what I had initially discovered. Cassandra had been systematically redirecting business development investments, client entertainment expenses, and even portions of my own salary contributions to accounts that she controlled exclusively. This isn't just poor bookkeeping, Dr. Rodriguez explained during a confidential meeting at his downtown office. This appears to be deliberate financial manipulation designed to extract assets from the partnership while creating the appearance of normal business operations. His detailed report documented over $47,000 in misappropriated funds over the past 6 months. Some of it was obvious fraud, using company credit cards for personal legal consultation and business formation costs. Other manipulations were more sophisticated, involving the redirection of client payments and vendor refunds to accounts that weren't reflected in our partnership's financial statements. But Dr. Rodriguez also identified something that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Cassandra had been inflating expense reports and creating fake vendor invoices to justify the movement of money out of our shared accounts. This wasn't just breach of partnership agreement, it was systematic accounting fraud that could result in criminal charges. Armed with this information, I met with Catherine Walsh, a business litigation attorney who specialized in partnership disputes and intellectual property theft. Catherine had a reputation for aggressive advocacy and a track record of successful outcomes in cases involving business betrayal. The evidence you've gathered is remarkably comprehensive, Catherine told me after reviewing the documentation. Your partner has created multiple legal vulnerabilities: breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of partnership assets, unfair competition, and potentially criminal fraud. The intellectual property theft involving your friend adds additional layers of liability. But Catherine identified strategic opportunities I hadn't considered. The timing of their activities actually works in your favor, she explained. They've been so focused on executing their extraction plan that they haven't protected themselves legally. We can use their own timeline and documentation against them. She outlined a multi-phase legal strategy that would not only recover the stolen assets, but also prevent them from using our intellectual property or client relationships in their new venture. The key is controlling the narrative and the timeline, Catherine explained. They think they're going to manage this transition on their terms, but we're going to force them to respond to our legal action instead.
As part of this strategy, I began creating additional documentation that would support our position. I started copying all business communications that demonstrated our collaborative work product, ensuring there was clear evidence of my contributions to every client relationship and strategic initiative they were planning to steal. I also began recording conversations with Cassandra using a discrete recording device that Catherine had recommended. In our state, single-party consent laws made these recordings legally admissible, and they would provide unambiguous evidence of her admissions about client transition planning and asset redistribution. The most damaging recording came during a conversation about our year-end financial planning. When I asked about the discrepancies in our business development budget, Cassandra actually admitted to reallocating some investments to better support our strategic priorities. What kind of strategic priorities? I asked innocently. Just some preliminary work on new market opportunities. Nothing you need to worry about right now, but I wanted to make sure we had the flexibility to move quickly when the right opportunities emerge. She had essentially admitted on tape that she was using partnership funds for personal business development that I wasn't involved in, a clear breach of her fiduciary responsibilities. By the end of the second week, I had assembled what Catherine described as an overwhelming case for partnership dissolution and damages recovery. We had documented evidence of financial fraud, intellectual property theft, client solicitation using confidential information, and breach of fiduciary duty. More importantly, we had identified specific legal remedies that would prevent Cassandra and Natalie from profiting from their betrayal. But I wasn't ready to execute the legal strategy yet. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves completely. I wanted them to fully commit to their betrayal, to burn all their bridges, and to create a situation where they couldn't claim innocent mistakes or misunderstandings. Most importantly, I wanted them to experience the same shock and helplessness they had planned to inflict on me. They thought they were carefully orchestrating my professional destruction while I remained oblivious to their activities. Instead, I had been documenting every move they made and preparing a response that would leave them devastated and defeated. The final phase of my counter strategy was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming for them. The confrontation came exactly 3 weeks after I had witnessed their secret meeting, but it arrived in a way that was more perfect than anything I could have orchestrated myself. It was a crisp Thursday morning in early November when Natalie made the mistake that would bring their entire scheme crashing down.
I was in our conference room, putting the finishing touches on what Cassandra believed was my preparation for the Meridian Industries renewal presentation. In reality, I was organizing the comprehensive evidence file that Catherine Walsh and I had assembling for the legal action we were about to initiate. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the same conference table where Cassandra and I had planned our business dreams to prepare for the systematic dismantling of her betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text message that made my blood freeze, but not in the way Natalie intended. The message read, "Meeting with Meridian moved to 2 p.m. today. Conference room changed to 4:18. Make sure you bring the updated financial projections and the transition timeline we discussed. This is our moment, Cass." Natalie had sent the text to me instead of Cassandra. For a moment, I stared at the screen in disbelief. After weeks of careful planning and meticulous execution, Natalie had made the same critical error that had exposed their original scheme. But this time, her mistake had revealed something even more damaging. They were meeting with Meridian Industries that very afternoon to finalize the client theft. I immediately forwarded the text to Catherine Walsh with a brief message. "They're accelerating the timeline, moving to finalize Meridian theft today. Should I proceed with confrontation?" Her response came within minutes. "Perfect timing. This gives us immediate evidence of active client solicitation. Proceed as planned. I'll have papers ready for filing by end of day."
I took a deep breath and walked to Cassandra's office, where she was reviewing what appeared to be presentation materials for a meeting she had never mentioned to me. "Interesting text from Natalie," I said casually, holding up my phone. "Something about a 2 p.m. meeting with Meridian and updated financial projections?" The color drained from Cassandra's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her confident expression crumbled into something between panic and desperate calculation. "I can explain," she said quickly, her voice higher than usual. "I'm sure you can," I replied, settling into the chair across from her desk with the same calm demeanor I used during difficult client negotiations. "But before you do, I think there are some things you should know." I opened the folder I had brought with me and placed the first document on her desk. A printout of the email thread where she had shared our client list with competitors from Pinnacle Marketing Group. "This is from July," I said matter-of-factly, "the beginning of your systematic plan to steal our clients and intellectual property." Cassandra's eyes widened as she recognized her own words on the page. "Where did you get this?" "From your computer, which you left unlocked when you thought I was too naive to investigate irregularities in our business operations." I placed the next document on your desk, the forensic accounting report showing $47,000 in misappropriated funds. Dr. Rodriguez found this particularly interesting. Apparently, you've been using our partnership's money to fund your exit strategy for months. "Listen, I can explain all of this," she said, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she used with difficult clients. "The business has grown beyond what either of us anticipated. I was exploring options for restructuring our partnership to better reflect our individual contributions." "By stealing our biggest client using proprietary information and fraudulently redirecting partnership assets?" I placed another document on her desk, a comprehensive list of Natalie's contacts with our clients. Chen Strategic Solutions has solicited 6 of our accounts using confidential information that Natalie obtained through you. That's not restructuring, Cassandra. That's industrial espionage. The fight seemed to go out of her as she realized the scope of what I had discovered. "How long have you known?" "I've known about your plan to steal Meridian Industries for 3 weeks, but I've known about your broader scheme to destroy Sterling and Associates for 2 weeks. The question isn't how long I've known, it's how you could have thought I wouldn't find out. You were so focused on the creative work, you never seemed interested in the business development side. I thought I was too stupid to notice that our business partner was systematically looting our company while planning to steal our clients. I thought you wouldn't question why you were suddenly working late every night, why you were being secretive about client meetings, why you were redirecting business expenses to accounts I couldn't access. I placed the final set of documents on her desk, transcripts of our recorded conversations where she had admitted to using partnership funds for personal business development. But the real mistake wasn't underestimating my intelligence. It was involving Natalie in activities that violated our partnership agreement and intellectual property protections. Because now this isn't just breach of contract. It's conspiracy to commit fraud. Cassandra was staring at the documents spread across her desk as if they were evidence of a crime she couldn't remember committing. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that while you were planning my professional destruction, I was documenting every illegal action you took in the process." I stood up and walked to her office window, looking out at the Brookfield Heights business district where we had once dreamed of building something lasting together. At 2 p.m. today, you and Natalie were planning to meet with Meridian Industries to finalize stealing our biggest client using our proprietary methodologies and confidential client information. You were going to present transition plans that you developed using partnership resources, while Natalie was going to offer services based on intellectual property that legally belongs to Sterling and Associates.
I turned back to face her. But that meeting isn't going to happen, because in approximately 1 hour, Catherine Walsh from Walsh & Associates will be serving you with papers for partnership dissolution, recovery of misappropriated assets, and injunctive relief preventing you or your co-conspirators from using our intellectual property or soliciting our clients. You can't do this, Cassandra said, but her voice lacked conviction. We built this business together. You can't just destroy everything because you're upset about restructuring plans. I'm not destroying anything, I replied. I'm protecting what we built from people who were willing to steal it. Sterling & Associates will continue operating, serving our clients and honoring our commitments, but it will do so without partners who violate fiduciary responsibilities and engage in fraud. My phone rang, and I saw Catherine Walsh's name on the screen. Perfect timing, I said, answering the call. The papers are ready for service. Catherine's voice was clear enough for Cassandra to hear. My process server is en route to your office. Is Miss Wright available to receive the documents? She'll be here, I said, looking directly at Cassandra, along with the comprehensive evidence file we've assembled. When I ended the call, Cassandra was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger or defiance, but genuine shock at being completely outmaneuvered. I also need to let you know, I continued, that Natalie will be receiving similar papers at her apartment this afternoon. Chen Strategic Solutions will be enjoined from operating until the intellectual property issues are resolved, and both of you will be required to return all confidential materials and cease any contact with Sterling & Associates clients. This is vindictive, she said quietly. We could have worked something out. No, Cassandra, vindictive would be pursuing criminal charges for the accounting fraud, which Dr. Rodriguez confirms meets the statutory requirements for prosecution. Vindictive would be publicizing your activities to every business organization in Brookfield Heights. Vindictive would be ensuring that no reputable firm would ever hire someone with your track record of partnership betrayal. I walked toward her office door, then paused. What this is consequence management. You made calculated decisions to violate our partnership agreement, steal our intellectual property, defraud our clients, and commit accounting fraud. Now you get to experience the results of those decisions. The process server arrived 20 minutes later, a professional woman who handed Cassandra a thick envelope with the calm efficiency of someone who had delivered bad news to unethical business partners many times before. I watched from my office as Cassandra opened the documents, her face growing paler as she read through the comprehensive legal action that would dismantle everything she had spent months planning. The injunctive relief was immediate and comprehensive. She was prohibited from contacting any Sterling & Associates clients, using any of our intellectual property, or operating any business that competed with our services. She was required to return all confidential materials, provide complete accounting of misappropriated funds, and cease all activities related to Chen Strategic Solutions. But the most satisfying element was the partnership dissolution terms that Catherine had negotiated. Rather than the carefully planned asset extraction that Cassandra had orchestrated, she would receive only her legitimate equity share minus restitution for fraud and breach of contract. The Meridian Industries relationship, along with all other client contracts, would remain with Sterling & Associates. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang with a call from Natalie. Her voice was shaky and desperate. "What is happening?" she said without preamble. "I just got served with legal papers claiming I've been involved in business fraud. There are injunctions preventing me from operating my consulting business. They're saying I have to return materials I've never seen before." "You've been served with the consequences of participating in the theft of intellectual property and client solicitation using confidential information," I said calmly. "The materials you claim you've never seen before include proprietary client analysis reports, financial projections, and strategic methodologies that belong to Sterling & Associates and were provided to you illegally by Cassandra." "I didn't know," she said,
though we both knew it was a lie. I thought Cassandra was sharing industry best practices and general market intelligence. Natalie, I have recordings of you presenting detailed knowledge of our clients' internal processes and confidential strategic initiatives. You solicited 6 of our accounts using information you could only have obtained through corporate espionage. That's not industry best practices, it's industrial theft. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of discovery and consequence. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought this was just business competition. Business competition involves developing your own intellectual property and earning clients through your own merit. What you did was participate in a conspiracy to steal from the person who trusted you most. And now you get to experience the actions have consequences, even when you convince yourself they're justified. By the end of that day, the scheme that Cassandra and Natalie had spent months perfecting lay in ruins. Their carefully planned client theft had been transformed into evidence of fraud. Their systematic asset extraction had become the basis for financial restitution. Their assumption that I would be too naive or trusting to fight back had proven to be the most expensive miscalculation of their professional lives. The legal proceedings that followed moved with a speed and efficiency that surprised even Catherine Walsh. Within 72 hours of serving the papers, we had obtained temporary restraining orders that effectively shut down Chen's Strategic Solutions and frozen Cassandra's access to any Sterling & Associates assets. But more importantly, the evidence we had assembled was so comprehensive that neither Cassandra nor Natalie could mount any credible defense.
The emergency hearing took place the following Monday morning in Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom at the Brookfield County Superior Court. I sat beside Catherine at the plaintiff's table, watching as Cassandra entered with a visibly nervous attorney from a mid-tier firm that specialized in damage control rather than aggressive litigation. Natalie sat in the gallery behind them, looking like she hadn't slept since receiving her legal papers. Judge Hendricks was known throughout the legal community for her no-nonsense approach to business disputes and her particular intolerance for cases involving breach of fiduciary duty. Catherine had chosen her courtroom strategically, knowing that our evidence would be evaluated by someone who understood the serious implications of partnership betrayal. Your Honor, Catherine began during her opening statement, this case involves a systematic conspiracy to steal intellectual property, defraud clients, and destroy a legitimate business partnership through deliberate breach of fiduciary duty. The defendants didn't just violate their legal obligations, they engaged in calculated criminal activity designed to enrich themselves at the expense of their victim. Cassandra's attorney, David Morrison, tried to frame the situation as a simple partnership dispute complicated by miscommunication and different visions for business growth. Your Honor, this is fundamentally a disagreement between business partners about the direction of their company. Ms. Wright's activities represent legitimate business development that has been mischaracterized by opposing counsel. Judge Hendricks listened to both arguments with the skeptical expression of someone who had heard similar claims many times before. But when Catherine began presenting our evidence, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically. The bank records showing systematic diversion of partnership funds were damning enough. But when Catherine played the recorded conversations where Cassandra admitted to reallocating investments to support strategic priorities that I wasn't involved in, even Morrison stopped taking notes and started looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. The intellectual property theft was even more devastating to their position. Catherine presented side-by-side comparisons of Sterling & Associates' proprietary client analysis reports and the materials that Natalie had used during her solicitation calls. The documents were virtually identical, down to specific formatting and analytical methodologies that had taken us months to develop. Your Honor, Catherine continued, Ms. Chen didn't just use general industry knowledge to compete with Sterling & Associates. She used confidential client information, proprietary analytical tools, and detailed strategic recommendations that she obtained illegally through Ms. Wright's violation of partnership agreements and client confidentiality obligations. But the most damaging evidence came from the email records showing Cassandra's coordination with competitors from Pinnacle Marketing Group. Judge Hendrick's expression grew increasingly stern as Catherine read excerpts from communications where Cassandra had shared client lists, pricing strategies, and upcoming business development plans with rival firms. Ms. Wright wasn't just planning to leave the partnership, she was actively sabotaging Sterling & Associates' competitive position while extracting maximum value for her own benefit. When Morrison stood to present Cassandra's defense, his argument fell apart almost immediately. He tried to claim that Cassandra's activities represented normal, competitive intelligence gathering, but Judge Hendricks interrupted him sharply. "Counselor, are you seriously arguing that sharing confidential client information with competitors represents normal business practice?" "Your Honor, my client's activities were focused on exploring new market opportunities. Using stolen intellectual property and partnership funds that she had no legal right to access for personal business development?" Judge Hendricks's tone made it clear that she wasn't buying the spin. "Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed the evidence presented by plaintiff's counsel. The bank records alone show systematic conversion of partnership assets. The recorded conversations demonstrate conscious awareness that these activities violated her fiduciary obligations. This isn't aggressive business development. It's fraud." Morrison tried to recover by arguing that the partnership agreement was ambiguous about individual business development activities, but Catherine had anticipated this approach. She presented the original partnership documents that Cassandra and I had signed, which contained explicit prohibitions against using partnership resources for individual ventures, and clear requirements for disclosure of any activities that might compete with Sterling & Associates. "Your Honor," Catherine said, "Ms. Chen signed these agreements voluntarily. She understood her legal obligations when she chose to violate them. The evidence shows deliberate, systematic breach of contract designed to transfer maximum value from the partnership to her personal benefit." The hearing lasted less than 3 hours, but by the time Judge Hendricks announced her decision, it was clear that Cassandra and Natalie had lost completely. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that defendants engaged in systematic breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of partnership assets, and unfair competition through theft of intellectual property. The plaintiff's request for injunctive relief is granted in its entirety." The terms of the judgment were more comprehensive than I had dared to hope. Cassandra was required to immediately return all misappropriated funds, plus interest and penalties that brought the total restitution to over $65,000. She was permanently enjoined from using any Sterling & Associates intellectual property or client information and prohibited from operating any competing business in the region for 18 months. Natalie's situation was even worse. Chen Strategic Solutions was dissolved immediately with all assets frozen pending resolution of the intellectual property claims. She was required to return all confidential materials, cease any contact with our clients, and pay damages for the attempted client theft that the court calculated at $85,000 based on the potential revenue loss. But the most damaging evidence came from the emergency hearing where Judge Hendricks ordered something that would have lasting consequences for both of them. All court documents would become part of the public record, creating a permanent legal history of their fraudulent activities that would follow them throughout their professional careers.
The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. Within a week, Cassandra had cleared out her office at Sterling & Associates, taking only her personal items under the supervision of a court-appointed monitor. The confident, charismatic business partner I had once trusted was replaced by someone who looked defeated and genuinely shocked by the consequences of her actions. During the asset transfer process, she made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her scheme. "We could have been something great together," she said as she packed her personal files. "If you had just been more flexible about growth strategies, none of this would have been necessary." "Cassandra," I replied calmly, "growth strategies don't require fraud, theft, and betrayal. They require hard work, ethical business practices, and respect for your partners. You chose a different path, and now you're experiencing the consequences of that choice."
The impact on our client relationships was surprisingly positive. When I personally contacted each client to explain the situation and the legal protections we had implemented, most were impressed by the thoroughness of our response and concerned about the security breaches they had unknowingly experienced. Jennifer Torres from Brookfield Manufacturing was particularly supportive. "I'm actually relieved to understand what was behind those strange solicitation calls," she told me during a follow-up meeting. "The way you handled the situation demonstrates exactly the kind of professional integrity we want in a business partner." Robert Meridian's response was even more satisfying. "We never seriously considered changing firms," he admitted. "The proposals from Chen's Strategic Solutions felt too familiar, like they were based on inside information rather than original analysis. Now we understand why. Sterling & Associates has earned our continued trust through how you protected our confidential information." Within a month, I had not only retained all our existing clients, but gained 3 new accounts from companies that had heard about the legal case and wanted to work with a firm that took confidentiality and ethical business practices seriously. The financial restitution allowed me to expand Sterling & Associates operations sooner than originally planned. I hired 2 new employees, including Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant young strategist who brought fresh perspectives without the baggage of betrayal and deception. I also upgraded our office security and client confidentiality protocols, ensuring that no one would ever again be able to systematically steal our intellectual property. But perhaps the most important outcome was the transformation in my own professional reputation throughout Brookfield Heights. The business community had watched the legal proceedings with great interest, and the consensus was overwhelmingly supportive of how I had handled this situation. Marcus Chen, president of the Regional Business Council, approached me at a networking event 6 weeks after the court judgment. "The way you protected your business and clients while maintaining professional standards throughout this ordeal has been remarkable. We'd like you to consider joining our advisory board. We need more leaders who understand the importance of ethical business practices." The speaking invitations began shortly after that. The Brookfield Chamber of Commerce asked me to present a workshop on protecting your business from internal threats. The Young Professionals Association requested a panel discussion on ethical partnership management. 3 different business schools invited me to guest lecture on crisis management and legal protection in small business operations. But perhaps the most important outcome was watching how the professional community responded to Cassandra and Natalie's attempts to rebuild their careers. Word of the court judgment had spread quickly through industry networks, and both of them found themselves essentially blacklisted from reputable firms and consulting opportunities. Natalie reached out once, about 2 months after the judgment, asking if we could meet for coffee to clear the air between us. I declined politely but firmly. There was no air to clear. There was only a former friend who had chosen to participate in the systematic betrayal of someone who had trusted her completely. The consequences weren't just professional. The stress of legal proceedings, financial penalties, and professional exile took a visible toll on both of them. Mutual acquaintances reported that Cassandra had been forced to move back to her parents' house and take a low-level position at a small firm 2 hours outside the city. Natalie had abandoned her MBA program and found work as a part-time administrative assistant while struggling to pay the court-ordered damages. I felt no satisfaction in their personal struggles, but I also felt no sympathy. They had made calculated decisions to destroy my business and personal relationships for their own benefit. The fact that their scheme had backfired and created consequences they hadn't anticipated was simply the natural result of their choices. Standing in my expanded office 6 months later, looking out at the Brookfield Heights business district where Sterling & Associates had not only survived, but thrived despite the attempted betrayal, I realized that Cassandra and Natalie had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. They had forced me to discover exactly how strong, smart, and resilient I was when everything I had built was under attack. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Sterling & Associates headquarters, a gleaming suite that occupied the entire 15th floor of the newly constructed Innovation Tower in downtown Brookfield Heights. The view stretched across the business district where my journey had begun, But everything looked different now, not just because of the physical elevation, but because of how fundamentally I had changed as a person and professional.
The transformation had been more profound than I could have imagined when I first discovered Cassandra and Natalie's betrayal. What started as a defensive response to protect my business had evolved into a complete reimagining of what Sterling and Associates could become when built on genuine integrity rather than naive trust. The numbers told part of the story. Our client roster had grown from 15 accounts to 38, with a waiting list that extended 6 months into the future. Annual revenue had increased by 340%, driven not just by growth in existing relationships, but by a steady stream of referrals from clients who valued our demonstrated commitment to confidentiality and ethical business practices. But the quantitative success was only the surface of what had really changed. The Sterling and Associates that existed now was fundamentally different from the company Cassandra and I had originally built. Where the original version had been based on friendship, shared vision, and mutual trust, the new Sterling and Associates was built on verified competence, documented accountability, and systematic protection of client interests. I had learned to distinguish between trust and verification, between collaboration and vulnerability, between openness and naivety. Every new hire went through comprehensive background checks and signed detailed confidentiality agreements with specific legal penalties for violations. All client information was now stored on secure servers with access logs that tracked every interaction. Partnership agreements for any future collaborators included immediate termination clauses for any breach of fiduciary duty. The team I had assembled reflected this new approach to business relationships. Sarah Mitchell, my director of strategic development, had been thoroughly vetted not just for her impressive credentials, but for her track record of ethical behavior in previous positions. Michael Torres, our creative director, came with references from 3 former colleagues who specifically praised his integrity and reliability. Jennifer Park, our client relations manager, had actually approached me after hearing about the legal case, specifically because she wanted to work for a firm that took confidentiality seriously. Each of these team members brought not only professional competence, but a shared understanding that Sterling and Associates represented something more than just another consulting firm. We had become known throughout the region as the company that proved it was possible to achieve rapid growth while maintaining the highest ethical standards. The speaking engagements and advisory positions that had emerged from the legal case had evolved into a secondary revenue stream that I hadn't anticipated. The Harvard Business School case study based on our situation had been downloaded over 50,000 times by students and professionals studying partnership management and crisis response. My presentation on protecting your business from internal threats had been requested by business organizations in 12 different cities. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the Regional Business Ethics Association, which awarded Sterling and Associates their annual Excellence in Professional Integrity Award. Standing at the podium during the ceremony, looking out at an audience of business leaders who understood the significance of what we had accomplished, I felt a satisfaction that went far beyond financial success. 18 months ago, I told the audience, I discovered that the people closest to me professionally were systematically betraying everything we had built together. I could have responded with anger, desperation, or attempts at personal revenge. Instead, I chose to respond with systematic documentation, legal protection, and strategic business planning. I paused, looking directly at several young entrepreneurs in the audience who reminded me of who I had been before the betrayal. The lesson isn't that you should distrust everyone or assume the worst about business relationships. The lesson is that trust must be earned continuously through actions, not just established through words or shared history. Real business partnerships are built on verified competence and documented accountability, not just good intentions and personal affection. The applause was sustained and genuine, but what meant more to me were the conversations afterward with other business owners who had faced similar betrayals. Many of them had responded with purely emotional reactions, public confrontations, social media campaigns, or attempts to damage their former partners' reputations through gossip and innuendo. While understandable, these approaches had typically resulted in prolonged drama without meaningful resolution.
You treated it like a business problem that required a business solution, one woman told me. That's why you won completely while protecting your professional reputation. The personal transformation was equally significant, though harder to quantify. The woman who had trusted Cassandra and Natalie completely was gone, but she hadn't been replaced by someone cynical or closed off to genuine relationships. Instead, I had developed what I privately called strategic trust, the ability to build meaningful professional relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries and verification systems. My social circle in Brookfield Heights had naturally evolved into people who shared similar values around integrity and accountability. I no longer maintain friendships based primarily on history or convenience, but sought relationships with people whose actions consistently aligned with their stated principles. The dating life that had been non-existent during the crisis had resumed, but with a completely different approach. I was no longer looking for someone to complete me or validate my choices, but for an equal partner who brought their own strengths and integrity to a relationship. The confidence I had gained from successfully protecting my business translated into personal relationships where I could be genuinely myself without needing approval or acceptance from others.
3 months ago, I had started seeing Dr. James Richardson, a business law professor at Brookfield University, who had contacted me after using our case as a teaching example in his graduate courses on entrepreneurial legal issues. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared intellectual interests, and most importantly, demonstrated trustworthiness through consistent actions over time. What I admire most, James had told me during a recent dinner conversation, isn't just that you outsmarted people who betrayed you. It's that you did it while maintaining your integrity and building something better than what existed before. But the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. The woman who had been devastated by discovering her business partner's betrayal had been someone who defined herself largely through other people's perceptions and approval. She needed Cassandra's validation to feel successful, Natalie's friendship to feel valued, and clients' praise to feel competent. The woman I had become understood that her worth came from her own competence, integrity, and ability to create value for others. I no longer needed external validation to know that I was successful, because I could see the concrete results of my work in the thriving business I had built and protected. I no longer feared being alone, professionally or personally, because I had proven to myself that I could handle whatever challenges arose. This morning, I had received an email that would have seemed impossible 18 months ago. Cassandra had reached out through an intermediary, asking if I would be willing to provide a reference for her application to a business rehabilitation program designed to help professionals rebuild their careers after ethical violations. The request demonstrated how completely our positions had reversed. The confident business partner who had once dismissed me as naive and uncreative was now asking for my help to repair a reputation that her own choices had destroyed. The woman she had planned to discard as dead weight in her ambitious new venture was now in a position to determine whether she would have any chance of professional redemption. I spent considerable time crafting my response, not because I was unsure of my decision, but because I wanted to ensure it reflected the principles that now guided all my professional relationships. I declined to provide the reference, but did so with the same measured professionalism I had maintained throughout the legal proceedings. While I understand your desire to rebuild your career, I wrote, providing a reference would require me to attest to character and integrity that I cannot honestly endorse based on my direct experience. I wish you success in finding the appropriate references to support your professional development. It was a response that closed the door firmly, but without personal animosity or vindictive satisfaction. Cassandra's future would be determined by her own efforts to earn trust and credibility, not by my willingness to overlook documented betrayal for the sake of forgiveness or reconciliation. Standing on that rooftop terrace, watching the sun set over the business district where Sterling and Associates had not only survived but thrived despite systematic betrayal,
I reflected on how completely my understanding of success had evolved. 18 months ago, I had measured success primarily through external metrics: revenue growth, client satisfaction, partnership harmony, and social acceptance. Today, I measured success through internal metrics: integrity maintained under pressure, strategic thinking applied to complex challenges, and the ability to create value for others that couldn't be destroyed by other people's choices. The business I had built was more profitable, more secure, and more ethical than what had existed before the betrayal. But more importantly, the person I had become was more confident, more capable, and more authentic than the woman who had been deceived by people she trusted completely. The betrayal that Cassandra and Natalie had intended to be my professional destruction had instead become the catalyst for my transformation into someone genuinely unbreakable. They had tried to rate me out of my own story, to cast me as the naive partner who would step aside gracefully when confronted with superior business acumen. Instead, they had created a formidable opponent who understood that the best revenge wasn't personal destruction or public humiliation, but systematic success that made their betrayal irrelevant to my future. The woman they had underestimated was gone, replaced by someone who had proven that integrity, intelligence, and strategic thinking would always triumph over deception, manipulation, and fraud. Looking out at the lights of Brookfield Heights beginning to twinkle in the early evening, I raised my glass of wine in a silent toast to the woman I had become and the future I was building on my own terms, completely independent of anyone else's approval or validation.